I was sitting in seat when Marcus said it. We were somewhere over Nevada, maybe 40 minutes from landing in Las Vegas. The family trip I had paid for, every flight, every hotel room, every dinner reservation, and my son leaned across the armrest, not even turning to look me in the eye, and said, "Dad, you really need to learn to manage yourself." I didn't say anything. I turned toward the window and watched the desert below us, brown and flat and indifferent, and I didn't say a word. Not because I had nothing to say, because I had too much. Because 63 years of living had taught me one thing above all others. The most powerful thing a man can do when he's been insulted is go very, very quiet. My name is Daniel Hargrove. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer before I retired. I built bridges, literal ones, the kind that hold thousands of pounds of steel and concrete and the weight of people moving through their lives. I know something about load-bearing structures. I know something about what happens when stress accumulates in the wrong places. I know exactly when something is about to break. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago, breast cancer, quick and brutal. She was the warmth in the house, the one who remembered birthdays, who softened my edges, who kept the peace when Marcus and his wife Renee started becoming people I didn't fully recognize. After Carol died, I watched my son slowly stop seeing me as a father and start seeing me as an obligation, an inconvenient line item in the budget of his life. The Las Vegas trip was my idea. My 75th birthday was coming in 3 months, and I thought, foolishly, it turns out that a family trip might close some of the distance that had opened up over the years. Marcus had 2 kids, my grandchildren Lily and Owen, ages 14 and 11. I wanted to see them somewhere outside the strained formality of Christmas dinners. I offered to cover everything. Flights, the Bellagio, shows, dinners, $12,000, give or take. What I got in return was a week of being managed. It started before we even boarded. At the airport, Renee had taken it upon herself to print out a laminated itinerary. I am not exaggerating, she had laminated it, and during our pre-flight coffee, she slid it across the table to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We thought it would be good to have a plan, Daniel, so nobody gets overwhelmed. Nobody, right? I was the only one over 60. I was the only one who had lived through anything. I was the only one who had watched people actually build things, sacrifice things, lose things. But in their version of the trip, I was the liability, the one who needed a laminated schedule to function. Day 1, I wanted to walk through the older part of the Strip, the Fremont Street area, where the city still had some history to it. Marcus said it was too far and not really safe. I'm a 63-year-old man who once supervised a construction site in the middle of monsoon season, but sure, Fremont Street was too dangerous for me. Day 2, I suggested a steakhouse I'd read about for dinner, an old-school place, linen tablecloths, a good wine list. Renee had already made a reservation at a trendy spot she'd found on social media, somewhere with small plates and loud music and a 3-hour wait. When I mentioned I'd prefer somewhere quieter, Marcus said, without looking up from his phone, "You can always order room service, Dad." Room service? I swallowed it. I went to the trendy restaurant with the small plates and the noise that rattled my fillings, and I watched my grandchildren stare at their phones while Renee photographed the food before anyone could eat it, and I told myself I was there for Lily and Owen. That was still true. That part I meant. Day 3, somewhere over Nevada on a short connecting flight back from a day trip to the Grand Canyon, which had been magnificent, the one part of the trip I genuinely loved. Marcus finally said the thing that had been building all week. We had been talking about a property I owned, or rather Marcus had been talking at me about it. I own a lake house about 90 minutes from the city. Carol and I bought it in 1998, long before the surrounding area developed into what it is now. It's worth considerably more than we paid for it. Marcus had been nudging me about it for 2 years. Sell it, split the proceeds, be smart about liquidity. What he meant was that he wanted his inheritance pre-distributed while I was still alive and healthy enough that it wouldn't feel like inheritance. He wanted the money without the grief. I told him on the plane, calmly, that I wasn't selling, that I liked going up there in the summer, that it was one of the last places I still felt Carol. And that's when he said it. "Dad, you really need to learn to manage yourself." Not, "I understand," not, "I hear you," not even the pretense of empathy, just a flat, corporate little sentence, the kind you'd say to a difficult employee who keeps asking for things they're not entitled to. I looked out the window. 40,000 feet below me, the desert looked very still. We landed, we collected our bags, we said our goodbyes in the parking garage with the particular stiffness of people who know something happened but aren't namming it. Renee hugged me with her arms but not her body. Marcus shook my hand. The kids waved from the back seat. I drove home alone. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't send a text. I made myself a simple dinner, eggs and toast, something Carol used to make when either of us needed comfort, and I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and I began to write. Not a letter, a plan. See, here's the thing about managing yourself. I'm actually quite good at it. I have been for 31 years. Managing yourself means knowing the difference between reacting and responding. It means understanding the long game. It means recognizing that the most consequential decisions are never made in the heat of the moment. The lake house, Marcus had been angling for it because he knew what it was worth. The area had developed considerably. A marina went in 2 years ago, property values had climbed sharply, and there was active commercial interest in the waterfront parcels. He had done his research. What he hadn't done was assume I'd done mine. 2 weeks after we landed, I called a real estate attorney named Patricia Wells, someone I'd worked with professionally 20 years ago, a sharp woman who understood both property law and discretion. I explained the situation. I told her I was thinking about the lake house, about what to do with it, and about a few other properties I'd been sitting on. I also told her I was thinking about my estate structure more broadly. We met 3 times over the following month. What emerged from those meetings was this: the lake house would not be sold. Instead, it would be placed in a trust, a revocable living trust with me as trustee for my lifetime, and upon my passing, the asset would transfer not to Marcus, but to Lily and Owen directly, to be held in a separate educational and housing trust until they turned 25. Marcus would have no access to the principal, no management authority, and no role in the administration. Patricia also helped me restructure my investment accounts in a way that made the overall estate considerably more tax efficient, which was its own reward. But the structural message was clear. The lake house was for my grandchildren, for the kids who'd waved at me from the back seat, not for the man who had told me at 40,000 feet to manage myself. There were 2 other properties, a rental duplex I'd purchased in 2004 and a small commercial unit downtown that had been appreciating steadily. I restructured those as well. The duplex went into a separate trust with a charitable remainder provision. The commercial unit I sold outright to a local developer, quietly, without announcement, and moved the proceeds into a donor-advised fund in Carol's name. A scholarship for engineering students at the university, where I taught part-time in the 90s. Carol would have loved that. She always said I got too attached to assets and not enough to people. She wasn't wrong. I told Marcus none of this, not immediately. We spoke on the phone twice in the weeks that followed, short, surface-level calls, the kind where you cover weather and schedules and nothing real. He asked once casually if I'd thought any more about the lake house. I said I was still thinking. That was technically true. 3 months later, my 75th birthday arrived. Marcus and Renee organized a small dinner, a restaurant they chose, a time that suited their schedule, a guest list that was mostly their friends with a few of mine folded in as an afterthought. I appreciated the gesture. I wore a good jacket and I ordered the lamb, and I was genuinely glad to see Lily and Owen, who had both grown since the trip and were funnier and sharper than I remembered. After dinner, walking to the parking lot, Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. It was the kind of touch that carried a question inside it. "You doing okay, Dad? You've seemed different lately." I considered that. "I'm doing very well," I told him. "Patricia Wells helped me sort out my estate this fall. Everything's been updated." He went still in the way that people go still when they're computing something. "The lake house. In trust for Lily and Owen." A long pause. The parking lot was cold. Our breath made small clouds between us. I've been thinking about what managing myself actually looks like," I said. "It looks like this. Making sure the people I love most are taken care of in the way that makes the most sense. Lily and Owen deserve a foundation. You already have one." Marcus didn't argue. He's not a stupid man, just a man who had for a few years confused my patience with passivity and my love with obligation. The distinction had finally been clarified. We drove home separately. He called me 4 days later, a longer call this time, more honest. He apologized for the plane. Not in so many words. Marcus has never done things in so many words, but he said he'd been under a lot of financial pressure at work, that Renee and he were restructuring some things, that he'd been not great to me lately and he knew it. I accepted it, not because it resolved everything, not because a phone call erases the memory of a man telling his father, at 40,000 feet, to manage himself, but because he's my son. Because I could see, underneath the pressure and the carelessness, the boy I had raised, the one who used to sit in my truck on Saturday mornings and ask questions about the buildings we drove past. Because Carol would have wanted me to leave room. Last summer I spent 2 weeks at the lake house alone. I fished in the mornings and read on the porch in the evenings, and I cooked simple meals, and I slept better than I had in years. The water was still. The light came through the pines in long, quiet angles. I thought about Carol. I thought about the structures we build in our lives, the ones made of concrete and steel, and the ones made of something harder to name. Lily called me from camp that July. She'd found out about the trust through an overheard conversation, the way teenagers find out everything. She asked me why I'd done it, why I'd put the lake house in her name and Owen's. I told her because some things are worth protecting, because your grandmother and I built something worth passing down to people who will understand what it cost, because managing yourself doesn't mean holding everything tightly until the end. It means knowing what to hold and knowing who to give things to when the time is right. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to be an architect." I told her I thought that was a very good idea. I told her,